my documents. Oh, crap. Hold the mic.
Okay, we are officially live on YouTube.
Great. I would like to call the Henrietta Town Board meeting for May 13th, 2020 to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Here.
Councilmember Stafford,
Here.
Councilmember Safranek,
Here.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Here.
Supervisor Schultz.
Here. Due to the state of emergency procedures related to the coronavirus pandemic, the meeting will not be open for in-person public attendance. However, the public may participate online. Please visit henrietta.org/wishyouwerehere to view all options for participating in the meeting remotely. We'll begin the meeting by a silent prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Supervisor Schultz, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting from April 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolsner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. First up, we have a public presentation for the Antoinette Brown Blackwell ABB scholarships. Anita, are you on?
I believe Tina is going to speak first.
Oh, Tina, sorry, I was thinking it was Anita. That's the Hall of
okay.
Fame. That's the other one. Wrong organization, sorry about that. Tina, are you on?
Here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I have a few remarks. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and members of the town board for allowing us to participate in tonight's meeting. The Antoinette Brown Blackwell Society was organized in 1983 to recognize and promote the life and work of Antoinette Brown Blackwell, who was born on Pinnacle Road. In 1853, she became the first ordained female minister in the United States. She was a prolific writer and speaker about social reforms, including women's suffrage. We would like to thank our two major donors, State Farm Insurance and Mr. Robert H. Donaldson, who has provided funds in memory of his wife, Dorothy Rosalie DeGrief Donaldson. Since its formation, the Antoinette Brown Blackwell Society has awarded 45 scholarships to individuals from the community who are pursuing degrees in higher education. I would like to introduce Anita Hawkins, Chair of the Scholarship Committee, who will present this year's scholarship winners to the town board.
Good evening. I'm Anita Hawkins, Chair of the Scholarship Committee. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I'm excited and proud to announce the Antoinette Brown Blackwell Scholarship winners for 2020. The scholarships are awarded to students in the Rush Henrietta community who are pursuing higher education. Our two recipients this year are Jessica McNeil and Alyssa Wynn. Let me share with you some of their achievements, which illustrate their community service, intellect, and leadership. I'll begin with Jessica. Jessica McNeil is a thoughtful, honest, and caring young woman. Her teachers say that she approaches all of her work with seriousness and responsibility. She demonstrates the best kind of leadership, leading by example. As a member of the Link crew, she provided mentoring to younger students entering the senior high school. Jessica has been Student of the Month and on the High Honor Roll. She is also a member of the National Honor Society and has been inducted into the Henrietta Youth Hall of Fame for 2020. In addition to her great academic achievements, she is also a youth athlete. She is a member of the varsity cheer and made All-County. She was also a member of the JV soccer team. What is most impressive about Jessica is her commitment to giving back. On any day of the week, Jessica can be found supporting patients and staff in our 3 major hospitals. She has assisted in the physical therapy department, general medicine, and the emergency department of these hospitals. You can also find her helping customers at Wegmans on Calkins Road or working with young children at Expressive Beginnings Daycare. Not quite sure how she finds the hours in the day to accomplish this, but she does. We believe that Jessica will make a significant contribution to her community wherever her path takes her. She will attend Niagara University this fall, studying nursing. Jessica, we wish you continued success as you pursue your career. Congratulations. Jessica, would you like to say a few words and unmute your button?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Jessica, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Got you. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm very excited to be able to have a scholarship and move on forward into college. I believe that this scholarship will be able to give me what is needed for me to be able to go to Niagara University to pursue nursing. I just want to say thank you so much. Obviously, everything that's happening, it's really hard for everyone to meet and everything. So thank you so much for setting everything up. And I wish everyone the best with everything given and hope everyone stays safe during this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and
Thank you.
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Next, I will introduce to you Alyssa Wynn. Alyssa is a hardworking, conscientious, and responsible young lady. She has a huge passion for learning foreign languages, especially French. Alyssa is planning on attending Nazareth College this fall to earn a bachelor's degree in French. She clearly wants to use her gift and passion to understand and communicate with people from other countries. She values using her imagination, creating new ideas, and learning from her mistakes. She is a good listener and tries to understand different opinions, feelings, and points of view. These qualities will serve her well as she becomes a teacher or a translator. She is a member of the mixed choir and enjoys volunteering in the life skills classroom at RH. She has been on the High Honor Roll and inducted into the 2020 Henrietta Youth Hall of Fame. As I was preparing this introduction, I reviewed her application and my notes from our interview. I think that sharing an excerpt from a letter of recommendation from her school counselor is a great way to illustrate Alyssa's character. This is from Jessica Kinsman. Alyssa is no stranger to challenges and overcoming obstacles. Physical limitations have forced Alyssa to adapt to a way of life different from her peers. Rather than be defined by her physical limitations, Alyssa acknowledges them, adjusts, and advocates. Knowing what I knew about Alyssa's circumstances before I met her, I will admit I was concerned with how she might adjust to high school. Alyssa didn't miss a beat. As she entered 10th grade, she began to find herself both academically and socially, taking a full course load, making new friends, and pursuing her passions, French language and music. She is also not afraid to take a chance. She auditioned for our select choir, and while she was not chosen, she did not let that define her. She embraced our concert choir and even performed a solo last spring. While Alyssa is unable to participate in clubs after school due to constraints outside of her control, she does not let this stop her from being involved in all the ways she is able to be during the school day. Alyssa volunteers with our life skill students, many of which have significant learning and developmental needs. Her patience and her compassion are truly inspiring. Every time I encounter Alyssa, whether in the cafeteria, the classroom, the hall, or my office, her love for school is evident. She will also often remark how lucky she is to have such great classmates and teachers. The gratitude expressed by Alyssa on a daily basis, giving the challenges she faces, leaves me in awe. That was from her school counselor, Jessica Kinsman. When Tina Thompson and I interviewed Alyssa a day before the Henrietta Public Library closed due to COVID-19, we were impressed by this young lady's tenacity, her passion towards her studies, and her grace. Alyssa, we wish you every success as you follow your dreams. Congratulations. Would you say a few words to us, Alyssa? Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So I would like to say thank you for granting me the scholarship. It means everything to me. And I know for sure that all my future plans are gonna give me the confidence that I need for college in order to become a French major. And I know for sure that all the confidence that I really need will help me go far in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we have a few certificates that we will get out to you. We just did a quick scan or a photo of them. Becky, if you could share those to the screen. I think Alyssa's are up first. So this is one from the town. I will note in the future, Tina, if you could also put the signature lines for the town board, I'd love to have their names on it as well. Go forward. We also have a certificate from State Assembly Member Harry Bronson. And forward. And whoops, one back. And we also have a certificate of merit from State Senator Patrick Gallivan. So there may still be more coming. Those were here before the start of the meeting, so we were able to put them in. And then go forward, we'll share Jessica. She has the same three. So again, the one from the town. Go forward. One from Harry Bronson. Go forward. Forward. And then one from Patrick Gallivan. So again, congratulations on your achievement. And thank you very much to the ABB Scholarship Program and the sponsors who helped make it happen. We think it's a great asset for this town and very appreciative of all the scholarships that you have handed out over the years. Anybody want to add anything else?
Congratulations to both of you, and thank you so much for being role models for the younger ladies that will be coming up behind you.
Congratulations. You should be very proud of yourself. What a great accomplishment. And I just don't know how you find the time to do what you do, but very impressive. Congratulations and so much good luck in the future.
I say congratulations to Jessica and Alyssa, and I'll see you at the Hall of Fame dinner where I can meet you.
Congratulations to both of you. And I don't know how everybody finds it, if you both find the time to do everything.
Just as a note, the Hall of Fame dinner may not be a dinner. It may be an outside event. That will largely depend on where this pandemic progresses. But we will have some form of recognition event for the Hall of Fame recipients.
Look forward to meeting them.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you so much for everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay, also on the agenda, we have an update on the assessments. I'm checking to see if Sarah is going to be providing that. I will say that the process is going. There's been a lot of questions online regarding why we chose to do this assessment now. I'll speak to it again. Basically, we were notified by the state that we had to reassess roughly 13,000 properties, although there were some overlap in their two lists, that in order to achieve full valuation. Why is it important to achieve full valuation? Because if you're not, you get hit with an equalization rate penalty. What that does is it provides a multiplier for all your common tax rates. So like your county tax rate, your school tax rate, any that are between two different towns. What makes it worse is that that same multiplier then reduces the amount of any of your exemptions. So like a star credit would be reduced, a senior limited exemption would be reduced. So the question is, well, still, okay, how bad is that? We don't know exactly what the number would be because that, I don't think it had been fully determined, but I will use for an example, this current tax year's, the comparison of the rates for Rush and Henrietta. I'm only comparing the county and the school rates because those are the two that are in common. So Rush this year was not at full valuation, and as such, they were hit with a equalization rate penalty. When you compare the Henrietta County rate to the Rush County rate, and of course we're in the same county, we're both in Monroe County, Rush's county rate is, I don't remember if it was 16 or 17% more, somewhere thereabouts. And the school rate, again, we're in the same school district, just looking at the Rush Henrietta School District rate, the Rush School District rate was 16 to 17% more. One of those was 19, I don't remember which. I unfortunately didn't think to write it down before I started the meeting. But what that worked out to be is for a $150,000 home, just assuming that all the tax levies were exactly the same next year, that means that that person would pay $700 more in county and school tax alone. And to make it worse, if they had a star credit, they would have to pay an additional $100 more because of the reduction of that star credit. And if they were a senior limited, if they received a full senior limited exemption, then they would have to pay about another $350. So all told, that would be $1,150 that they would have to pay in higher taxes. And that's with nobody raising taxes, which I think we all know that's not a likely scenario, especially with COVID. We already know the fire district is planning on doing a tax raise. We already know that the school district is planning on doing a tax raise. I suspect the county will have to do a tax raise. We may be one of the very few municipalities or entities in all of all of Monroe County that doesn't. I don't know that we'll be able to achieve that, but we're sitting in really good financial position right now. And if this reopen goes on schedule, we should hopefully not have to raise taxes again this year. So, but again, would be $1,150 increase without counting those tax increases. So that's a 28% hike. When you looked at the average change in assessment, the whole town, the tax roll went up about 8 to 8.5%. Some of that's actual real growth with new development, new development added to existing properties. But even if you just ignore that aspect, it's 8% versus the 17% or 28% if you had full discounts. So as much as we did not want to do this now, we realized that it was better for our residents to do so. Now, we had asked the state, could they freeze penalties in the current year state for 1 year because of the COVID virus? The answer was no. We asked, could they delay the whole assessment process till after the economy was reopened, and they said no. At the last minute, they gave us a 30-day extension. By that point, we had done all the work, and we were afraid if we pushed, the 30 days doesn't get us past the pandemic. And all it potentially does is create confusion as to when the stuff was due. So we decided to stick to the original deadline. Although I will note that with the extra 30 days, if we need to have a prolonged grievance process, we can because of that extended deadline. Now, hopefully I'm correct on that. I'm not an assessor. Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong there, but like I said, that when we looked at it, it made the most sense to do. I realize it's not popular. I realize it could mean I don't get reelected next November. I don't do things to be popular. I don't do things to get reelected. I do them because it's right. If it gets decided that people don't want to vote for me, I can live with that. I can walk out of here head held high knowing that we did the right thing for this town, even though it wasn't popular. So with that said, Sarah, are you on? Is there anything you would like to add from a procedure standpoint?
So like you said, the whole reason behind the reassessment was to maintain that 100% equalization rate. It is very important for the residents. It does mean they'll be able to get their full star exemptions. We have been receiving a lot of phone calls from residents who obviously are slightly upset with any raises that we've sent out. We did send out 10,088 change notices from the assessment office. But this year, we've really tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. Residents who feel as though their assessment is not at market value, we have put all the instructions on how to grieve right on our website at henrietta.org on the assessor's page. We've tried to reword things to make it self-explanatory. We've been taking lots of calls. We're definitely open to answering any questions any residents have about the grievance process. Really, it falls into two categories. People either feel that they wouldn't be able to sell their house at a certain market value, or there might be a condition issue. So we put together two different worksheets for residents to utilize. The first is a market comparison worksheet, and that allows residents to go right to our website. We provided all the sales information. The same sales information we use to derive their assessments is available to all the residents right on the website. And we broke it down by style of home to make it as easy for the residents to find their style of home sales as possible. And then we categorize them all alphabetically by street. Again, just to make it as easy as possible for residents to see the sales that are occurring in their neighborhoods. Our goal is not to increase assessments to the highest we can. It's to make them as fair as possible based on the data that's out there. So the more residents can learn about what's going on in the market and see the sales for themselves, the better. We also provide a condition worksheet. If there's something about a resident's home we don't know about, we want to know about it. We want to be as fair and equitable as possible. Therefore, We provide this worksheet to give examples of some of the major issues we see with some of the homes in Henrietta. They can mark off what they feel is wrong with their house and then provide us with photos of those condition issues, quotes if they can get their hands on them. But we'll also accept if they've called the real estate office and they've described to that real estate agent the issues with their home, and that real estate agent has told them it will affect market value by X amount. We'll take that into consideration as well. We understand that they have limited access to the computers. We understand there's limited access to professionals at this time. We just want to be as fair as possible. So if you can have a licensed real estate agent help you out, we'll take that information as well. So we're doing everything we can to provide residents access to all the information we use to do the assessments and all the ways to grieve that assessment if it's not fair. So that's what the assessment office has been doing on a daily basis. But ultimately, it's the sooner the better you contact us. We are not open to the public at this time, but we are available by phone. We have a lot of our staff working remotely. It may take a day or two to respond, but if you leave a message, we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Like I said, we're trying to address every issue in a timely fashion, but we've received a lot of calls. And just like other businesses, we're down on our staff. We're doing everything we can to serve the residents of Henrietta and everything we can do to be as transparent as possible. So just bear with us, but we're here to help.
So one of the things I will note, there's a lot of people who don't understand the assessment process and the taxation process. One of the things that most people don't understand is the town does not get 1 penny more in tax by raising your assessment, nor do we get 1 penny less for lowering your assessment. The amount of taxes we collect is set at budget time. So we create to get budget, we put together a resolution to levy our taxes, and the amount of money we levy determines how much we get. By that point, the reassessment is already done. And so then what happens is you take that total tax levy and you divide it by the total assessed value of all taxable properties in the town, and that gives you the tax rate. So if the assessed properties are higher, the tax rate will be lower. The tax total assessed values are lower, the tax rate will be higher. The point being, no matter what those rates are, when you multiply them through, you will get the total tax levy. It will always be the same no matter what those assessments are. What the assessments do affect is how you slice up that pie of the tax levy. And so if your neighbor's house is not assessed at their full market value, in effect, you and all your other neighbors are picking up a portion of that person's tax burden, and that's not fair. Which is why it's important for us to get these assessments as close to fair market value as we possibly can. Now, during that, there's sometimes information that you know about your house that we don't. And that's what Sarah was just talking about, Will's forms, to get that information to us, because if we know that information, we can take that into account. It can go into the formula, if you will, and potentially affect your assessment up or down. And so by doing that and getting them as close as possible, it means that the tax that we have that we collect is split equitably amongst our residents and not unfairly because some people property isn't at full valuation. So again, I realize it's not a great time to be doing this. We know it has caused angst. Believe me, it caused angst here too. We don't like doing this. It's no fun for us to take all these angry calls. Boy, if you want to go home with low self-esteem, take those phone calls. In fact, while I was sitting here, I saw a message just come through saying we should be ashamed of ourselves for raising assessments. Again, I disagree with that because we actually are saving our residents money by doing so. It's a complicated process. I fully understand people don't fully grasp it. I try to explain it in as full detail as I possibly can on Facebook, and through email. So if you have a question and you want me to give that full explanation in an email so you have time to dig through it and look at it, I'm happy to do that. You know, I take that imaginary $150,000 home and I show you what the taxes are now and what the taxes are if the tax levies don't change. A lot of people say, can you tell me exactly how much I'll pay next year in taxes? The answer is no, we cannot. Because if you remember, that's determined by the tax levy, which doesn't happen for the school district until the summer, and for the town, county, fire district, ambulance, and any special districts in the fall. But what we can show you is what your taxes would be if the tax levies stayed the same. And so that would show you how you're affected by any change in assessed value. But it won't show you any additional taxes you're going to have to pay because a taxing jurisdiction increased their tax levy. One thing I'll note that in general, the way it works, and we saw this last year. So, you know, as again, I talked about dividing by that growth in the town as the assessed values went up. The school district last year raised their tax levy by roughly 4%. But the total assessed value went up in town by an amount greater than that. And as such, even though they had a greater tax levy, the tax rate actually went down. So again, similar concept, even though your assessment has gone up, for those whose assessment only went up a little bit, if it's less than the total assessed value growth for all the taxable properties, then you won't see an increase in tax. And again, for most people, even with the assessments, and there are a few exceptions, because there are some properties that hadn't been reassessed in a number of years, and with the massive growth in real estate recently, it represents a significant growth. But for most people, they would have paid more had we not done the reassessment and the equalization rate penalty similar to what Rush had this year were in effect. Now, I know a lot of people say, why didn't you cancel the reassessments like some other towns did? And again, when my assessor explained it to me and showed how it was more beneficial to our residents to do the reassessment, I fully supported that decision and we moved forward with it. The good news is, if you will, that those towns that did cancel their reassessment, they are going to be hit with an equalization rate penalty, which means they will be paying a higher county tax rate than we will. What does that mean? That means we pay a lower county tax rate. So in other words, if you think about it, if everybody's tax rates were equal and I apply a penalty that raises some of them up, again, the county doesn't take more money because of that. They levy their taxes. So when you then raise those up, that has to come from somewhere. So the people's whose doesn't get raised, theirs actually lowers. So we should be thankful to all those towns that canceled their reassessments, because it will actually help us from a county standpoint. And towards that end, Rush did not reassess. And so again, we will see that they will pay a higher tax rate for the Rush Henrietta School District than we will. So, you know, again, it's tough. We get it. It's a horrible time to be doing this. We would have loved to have delayed it for a year, but the state said no in terms of delaying those penalties. And so at that point, we said, let's do what is best for our community. And that's what we did.
Just one other comment. May 26th is our grievance day. And I know some residents do get confused that they have to wait until May 26th to submit their documents. The sooner the better as far as submitting documents. That gives us time to review them. If we do find something that makes it apparent to us that there was something off about, you know, their original assessment, we have time to work with that resident. But if they wait until grievance day, we've already started hearings, it becomes much more difficult to do it that way. So the sooner the better that people can reach out, the sooner the better that they can get their information to us.
And it also, there's an ability if what you provide using those sheets looks correct, you know, meets our stuff, there's ways that the assessor can stipulate to it to make your grievance process even easier. So again, the sooner you do it, the better, because it gives them opportunities to review it. And if it is applicable, if they can do the stipulation, then it makes your process even simpler.
I know I had some questions too about what the Board of Assessment Review is, and it is made up of residents. They're residents that live in the town of Henrietta. It's completely independent of our assessor's office. They make all their decisions behind closed doors. We have nothing to do with their decision-making process. I've had a lot of people feel as though after they submitted their information, if we still stand by our assessment, they feel like, what's the point in going to the Board of Assessment Review? If they feel like they haven't been heard, I would implore them to go in front of the Board of Assessment Review. We have mail-in options and where the board can look at documents they provide, or we have phone-in hearings that are available as well. But those are residents, just like you know, the residents that are calling in, that make those decisions independent of the assessor's office.
Sarah, is there a certain date that residents have to sign up for the grievance process?
Yes, they have to have their applications in no later than 8:30 on May 26th. They can do that by Dropbox. And actually we recommend that, you know, as it gets close to that time frame, within a week, if you have not submitted it by mail, I would recommend stopping by Town Hall's lobby and dropping it into the Dropbox, because if we receive that mail after May 26th, it cannot be heard for this year's grievance day. So we strongly recommend dropping off any documents into the Dropbox once it starts approaching the May 26th deadline.
Thank you.
The question was that 8:30 a.m. or p.m.?
PM. We have to accept documents as long as the board is hearing appointments that day. I believe the last hearing is at 8:15. They're roughly 15-minute appointments. So we advertised 8:30 as the closing time. Obviously, if it goes a couple minutes longer, we will keep that door open to allow residents to drop things off. But we will be shutting the doors as soon as the hearings are done that day.
Any other questions, comments? Was there anything online?
I have a question. Sarah, as a resident myself, I got reassessed in 2018. Went up maybe about 26,000. Now it's being reassessed again. I've talked to a lot of residents. They ask me this question, and I tell them, look, I'm getting reassessed again for another 15,000, just like you. What can you tell someone? Because I don't know what to tell them, besides that, you know, the equalization rate has to come up because real estate's increased. What do you tell people?
Right. Well, like I said, we first try to talk to them about the whole process of the assessment that from our point of view. So we looked at sales that are occurring, and we're seeing across Henrietta that the sale prices are going up in most neighborhoods. Each year we look at all of the assessments in Henrietta, and then we break Henrietta down by neighborhood codes based on when sometimes geographically, but other times based on the year something was built, similar builders, so that it's grouped in with other homes of similar style, similar age, similar features. And then we look at sales versus assessments. And in the neighborhoods where we see that the sales uniformly are coming in higher than the assessed values, the state mandates we go into those neighborhoods and we make those adjustments. Otherwise, as Steve said, the equalization rate will go down. Now, there's two schools of thought in this. One set of people say, I was just reassessed 2 years ago. Why am I receiving an assessment again, a reassessment again? Another school of thought says, yes, I haven't been reassessed in 10 years and now I'm getting a 40% jump. We can't do both. We can either, you know, keep up with reassessments, but that means you're going to get reassessed more often at what I would, you know, think would be smaller increments. I don't control the real estate market, but in general, you'd see smaller increments more often for those very large jumps, you know, but you may not have seen them for 10 years. Now, the problem with those big jumps is it can ruin a family's budget. We have people come in saying, I'm going to need to sell my home because I will no longer be able to pay my taxes. Plus, again, the state can penalize us by lowering our equalization rate due to the assessments being not at market value. So, I mean, we can reassess more often, or we can do the big jumps. What we've seen from residents is more residents prefer smaller jumps more frequently for their budgeting purposes than the larger jumps. It hurts the families of Henrietta less to see the small increments rather than the large jumps. But again, as Steve said, depending on how much your assessment went up, if you think of it like a pie, let's say you had 25% of a pie and that was yours. Well, now if you increase that pie size by doubling it, but your actual slice only increases by 10%, when you look at that bigger pie, you actually have a smaller portion of the pie. And so if your assessment only went up by a few percent, let's say less than 10%, just for an example. If the rest of the assessments out of the 10,088 adjustments that we made were on average higher than that, the portion of taxes you will pay as an individual will actually be less than if we never did a reassessment at all.
Gotcha. Well, it does make more sense to reassess more often, because the first time my assessment hadn't been done in probably 10, 15 years.
Right.
I understood that. That people don't understand so much, and you've been taking the calls that, oh, I just got it done last year and I'm getting it done again. They don't understand that part of it.
And part of that is the market. So when you look at houses that are on sale, they typically sell within a few days with a cash offer greater than asking price, no contingencies, and sometimes as much as $20,000 over the assessed value.
You just convinced me to sell my house.
I'm planning. I'm nervous because
another house in Henrietta.
the house across from me, the house across from me is right now asking 60% over their assessed value, and I'm afraid they're going to get it. Right? Yeah. So, you know, unfortunately, that's the market. Someone said it's a seller's market. It's not fair. Well, that is, by definition, the market value, right? You know, right after the after the Great Recession, it was a seller's market, right? Buyer, I said it backwards, sorry, buyer's market. The point being that people couldn't, you know, that the house prices were flat for a long time. In some places you saw even real estate go down. Yep. Rochester was one of those that we didn't see as much of the bubble. So we didn't see as much of the burst as some other areas around the country did. But, you know, the market changes. I've looked at a number of different things, and Lisa would know this better than myself since she's a realtor, but like as I was looking through some of these things just to do some analyses, I saw that houses appreciated by 48% since 2020. And prior to that, it was about 2% a year. So there was somebody talking about how he bought an $80,000, I think it was like $80,000 or $84,500 home in 1990, and it was just reassessed for $140,000. Well, if you apply that appreciation number, it comes out at $142,000. So it's right on target. You know, it's not rocket science. It is confusing because there's a lot of things that get taken into account. Was it an arm's length deal, right? If it was sold to a relative, it's usually considered that it's often a lower price. But for instance, sometimes what happens is that the property sells, the neighbor wants that property. Maybe they've got a parent that who wants to stay living independently, but they want them close by. So they're willing to pay greater than market value for that house. They take that into account, and in the sales book, it wouldn't go in at the sale price. It would go in at an adjusted sale price to account for that. And that also happens not just in residential, it happens in commercial. If you remember when it's now Cantrell, but it was SPS Medical, they bought the acreage next door to them. They paid an exorbitant per acre price, more than anyone ever paid for that type acreage of land. Well, there was a reason, because it was right next door to their existing factory. And if they bought land elsewhere, they would have had to pay to move all their existing factory. So they were willing to pay more per acre than anybody else in their right mind would ever pay for that. And so that's taken into account. That land was not assessed at its sale price because, again, it was known they paid more than market value. So that stuff is taken into account. But, you know, again, if you look at the markets and they're selling at above assessed values, you're going to see your houses go up. People want to live in Henrietta. We have the lowest town tax rate of any town that doesn't have a giant landfill in it paying all the property taxes, right? We have the lowest school tax rate in the entire Monroe County. So there's a lot of great shopping. There's a strong school system. There's a lot of good entertainment stuff. It's a place where people want to live. What that means is house values go up, and therefore your assessment goes up. The good news is when it is time for you to move and sell that house, it will be worth more. But I'll be honest, it's one of the things I don't like about the real property tax law and the whole assessment process, because it just creates angst. I do not like this system, but it's the system we have. And so we're currently, again, we chose this path to do what was best for the vast majority of all of our residents.
It's the right thing to do.
Okay, Becky, go ahead.
I think you sort of addressed this, but I have a comment here on YouTube from Eric. He's asking how many times in 4.5 years can they raise my assessment? And then he talks about his specific situation. I don't know if you want me to read this, but I guess I'm reading it. When I bought the house in 2015, it was at 105, and then 2016, it was raised to 132, in 2016, and in 2017, it was raised to 140. Now, after losing my mind, I talked them down to 150 from the 158.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but it can be reassessed every year if the demand for those houses is rising that quickly.
That's correct. I mean, we look at all assessments on an annual basis. And, just as an example of this particular person, I'm not sure that it was all due to just sales. Sometimes people's assessments go up because they might physically do something to the house. Sometimes it goes up just because of the market. Either way, like we said before, we're doing 14,000 parcels a year, and we do use a computerized system to assist us in that process. So it's not always going to be 100% accurate. It is most of the time. But like that resident said, he called us. We worked on, what we felt was appropriate. He reached out to a licensed real estate agent. He sent over one of those CMAs from a licensed real estate agent. We changed the inventory on his property because, quite frankly, it was not accurate in our system. But they had never alerted us that it changed, even though we do advertise prior to the tentative roll to call us. That's one of the legal responsibilities of our office, is to advertise, call in before the tentative is published, review your inventory with us so that your assessment is reflective of the inventory on your property. This resident had not done that. So once we adjusted the inventory, and again, we looked at what he had provided, we were able to agree on an assessment, and then we signed a stipulation, which is legally binding. So that was one example, but again, it can go up each year for different reasons. It's not necessarily just market value. It's also changes to your property will prompt a change of assessment.
You got any more, Becky, or was that the only one?
That was it. Craig tells me that Eric called on the phone, but it sounds like he hung up.
Gotcha. Okay, anything else?
No, sir.
Then can I get my first resolution? Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Mr. Supervisor, I have Resolution 1-140, 2020, to authorize bills payable for April 23rd, 2020 through today.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor, resolution 11-14, 2020, to accept the audited 2019 financial statement and other annual reports.
I will note, Rob is trying to read off of his phone. It was 11-141.
Thank you. 11-141, 2020, to accept the audited 2019 financial statements and other annual reports.
Seconded.
Any discussion? So as board members heard at the workshop meeting, we had glowing praise from the auditors. You know, we are in a very strong financial situation. We ended up roughly $4 million over in terms of over in revenue and under in expenses. We applied 2.1 million of that to lower this year's tax rate so that there was no increase in the tax levy. And that left us a little over $2 million to hopefully do the same for next year as well. In addition, they noted that anytime there was any type of, I don't want to say red flag, I'll say yellow flag because we had no red flags, but basically anything that they've said, oh, you know, you could do this better, you could change your process a little bit here to improvement, we've implemented all of those. And so, you know, each year we get stronger and stronger. They also like that last year we put in place, the town board put in place a, basically a policy regarding the fund balance and how we use it to reduce future tax burdens prior to spending. In theory, at the end of the year, if we reduce the tax, we'd have some stuff left over to spend. Obviously, we don't expect that to be the case this year because whereas our first quarter sales tax revenues were above margin because the economy was still chugging along, we know for a fact that the second quarter sales tax revenues are going to be significantly under. So I look at it that is going to eat up any of our quote unquote discretionary spending money. And so, but with that said, because we were in such a strong financial position and because this town has always been good about carrying a 20%, and the policy was 19 to 25, but typically around a 20% contingency, that should cover us for the loss of revenue. Obviously, if there is a backslide and we have to go back into lockdown mode and the economy is crippled for a long, long time, we may find things different, but you know, hopefully as it stands right now, we'll be able to get through this in a manner, and again, hopefully be one of the few, well, I'd love it if there were others, but that we would be a taxing jurisdiction that does not increase our taxes for next year. Any other comments?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Could you hold on 1 second? So before we go to the next resolution, we have a follow-up comment on the assessment.
Yes, Eric has asked when the comps go down, can he request a reassessment or does he have to wait for the town to do it?
So,
Again-
I mean, go ahead, Sarah.
Yep, comparables, you know, we can look at comparables every single year. And what I have told residents who have called in, you know, saying, will my assessment go down if that's what the data shows? I said, I will be the first one to sign up for lowering assessments if that's what the data shows. Believe me, you know, it would definitely cut down on the number of unfriendly phone calls that my office receives. And quite frankly, it'd be advantageous for us not to be raising assessments. It would be advantageous for us to be lowering them. So if that's what the data shows, but we try to be as objective as possible, which means we have to rely on the data that's provided by the sales that are occurring in Henrietta. It's the people buying houses that are dictating the market, is not the assessment office. And we're always looking behind. This year's valuation date was July 1st, 2019. So what you're seeing on the 2020 roll is what your house was worth July 1st, 2019. So as we collect sales data for this coming year, depending on whether it goes up, depending on whether it goes down, next year's roll will be reflective of what your house will be worth on July 1st, 2020. So again, if that means that sales are going down, then that's what you'll see on the roll. But again, we're always looking backwards to be as objective as possible and using the data from the sales occurring in Henrietta.
Well, if that happens ever, I'll have to move from Henrietta because my property values are going down. That wouldn't be very good.
Well, the theory being that it's possible that the pandemic could have an effect on property rolls. Based on previous recessions, it hasn't. What it usually does is it decreases the rate of increase, and it might even hold them flat, but it's not that common that you see real estate values go down.
We don't believe that's going to happen. The inventory is so low right now that we just don't see it happening. And it hasn't happened. I mean, with the homes that we've sold through the pandemic, they're still going up, multiple offers.
So,
Don't move.
right, that's right. So one of the things, you know, that we are looking at is there are a couple places that are building new homes. And as of Friday, we enter phase 1 of the reopen, and that includes construction. So those home constructions will be able to continue. Obviously, the more inventory available, the less pressure there is from a supply and demand on the pricing. So, you know, I know there's a desire for a lot of people that say, well, I've got my house now, so no more new houses in the entire town, stop building. There's actually an advantage to doing that, obviously in a controlled manner. We've done a lot from the terms of farmland protection and stuff like that. But by having that new inventory, it does, the more inventory, then the less market pressure there is to drive those prices up.
I'll say this, that, you know, to Eric and to anybody else who's listening, 1985, I bought my first house. Interest rates were 12% fixed, okay? It was definitely not a buyer's market. So if we looked at interest rates where they are now, compared to that, I bought 3 times the amount of house in 85 that I could buy today. So the good thing about this market is, even though it's a seller's market, interest rates, money is cheap.
3%.
So even if you make a mistake and overpay for a house at 3%, it's not a big mistake. But if you made a mistake at 12% and your property values went down, you're really under it. So the silver lining is it's good that property values are going up, and it's good that money is cheap, because that's the perfect storm.
And that's, cheap money is a part of the reason why people are willing to spend more, because they can afford more.
That's right.
So.
Absolutely.
And we don't have a crystal ball to see, you know, what's going to happen in the next year. There's a bunch of different things that could happen. I mean, people being laid off might affect their ability to get mortgages, which might mean there's less buyers. So even though there's not, you know, growing inventory, there's a leveling off of sale prices. There could be a number of different scenarios we see moving forward. And that's exactly why we're always looking behind. We're always looking at what's already happened. And so that's why we provide all of that information on the website, so people can actually see what the sale prices are in their neighborhoods. So that's why we just keep pushing people to the website. Go look at the sales, see what's happening in your neighborhood, so that at least you have a better understanding of where that assessment's coming from.
Becky, show us on the website where that is exactly.
So, Becky, I don't know if you'd be able to share it, but we can go to it real quick. If you go to our website, at the very top, there's a government menu. If you click on that, you'll see assessors. Click on assessors. It'll have instructions right on that page. And off to the left, there'll be a bar that talks about 2020 tax roll information or tax information. So under governments, you'll see she'll now click on assessors. And then on this page, you'll notice off to the left, it's the blue one and highlighted is the 2020 information. That includes the tentative roll. So on that tentative roll, it will have, your property will be listed in there, what it was assessed at. Included in there is, number of bathrooms, number of bedrooms, square footage, that type of information. If you see any errors in that, be sure to let us know that. Again, if you have something like a 30-year-old roof and it's about, you're going to need to replace that type of stuff, or a crumbling foundation, that kind of stuff, things that have an effect on the sale price of the home, that's what that one worksheet about the property condition is for. I'm not an assessor, I'm not a realtor, I don't know everything that affects your property prices, but if it's something major that you think, put it this way, if when you were looking at a house, if you saw that condition and said, boy, I don't know that I would pay this much for that house, then that's probably something you should report. If nothing else, call the assessor's office and ask them, because they can tell you pretty quickly.
And what's the assessor's office number?
Assessor's office number?
It's 359-7032.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do list examples of some of those condition issues right on that condition worksheet to make it a little easier for residents.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's resume our resolutions.
Right. Mr. Supervisor, I have Resolution 11-142, 2020, to authorize the supervisor to sign and execute a tolling agreement with Rush Henrietta Central School District regarding historic properties on the East Henrietta Road.
Seconded.
So for those who remember the meeting, we had a Article 10 hearing on March 11th regarding a couple of properties that the school had acquired from the church. It was Good Shepherd Church, the Berger Farmhouse, and a couple others. The Berger Farmhouse and the Good Shepherd Church are both historic properties. So any changes that the school district wanted to do had to go in front of that vote with recommendations from the Historic Site Committee. The Historic Site Committee and the town board felt very strongly that those historic sites were important to the town and should stay. The school district, whereas they have a potential to use the church, they have no potential to use the historic farmhouse because of its construction and age. It could never be brought up to the stricter construction codes that the education department uses. And so we had this thought of, what if we looked at transferring that from the school district to the town? And my thought was, do we use that for essentially as a meeting room for some of the community organizations in our town, such as RAFT, the Rush Henrietta Rotary, the Henrietta Foundation. So there's a number of these types of organizations that do a lot of stuff for our town, and they don't currently have office spaces. The idea would be we would use like the living room and the kitchen as the community meeting room spaces for those organizations. And then the other, whether the bedrooms or other smaller rooms would be, each one would be assigned to one organization more or less as their offices. So the issue is that if we don't come to that agreement, there would be if the school district wishes to fight the historic designation, they have a time limit within which to do that. We don't want to end up in court. So I was speaking with the superintendent and one of his directors, and we had a discussion about, well, why don't we put the timeline on hold so we can have these discussions, figure out an amicable solution that works great for the town, the school, and the community. And so that's what this agreement does. It essentially just pauses the game clock. We can have our discussions, come up with a solution. If we put that forward, in that solution would be a stipulation that there's no challenge, and there'd be no reason for them to challenge if we come up with an equitable solution, but it avoids any issues in that regards. And so, you know, it just, to me, it's a good solution all around. In those discussions, there was a talk of, well, if you're taking the farmhouse, would you also be interested in taking the church? And whereas I don't have a particular interest in taking the church, we did have some discussions about a way that might make it work, that it would be cost neutral to the town due to rentals, you know, similar to how we rent the cabins. So that's one of the things we want to have a discussion about to see if that works. Because again, from the school district standpoint, it would be very costly for them to bring that church up to the construction code standards of that the education institutions have to meet. Whereas the general building codes that we have to meet, it's largely up to that point. I think it might be a little deficient in some of the ADA compliance. So we would probably only have to do a little bit of ADA compliance, maybe a little rework depending on what the use is. So that's some of what we want to look at. If there are people who are very much interested in this, they can email me at supervisor@henrietta.org, because at some point we're going to form a committee to help put together some of the ideas. There'll be a board member or two on there. There'll be a couple people from the Historic Site Committee and a couple residents, and we'll just start looking at some ideas. Possibly someone from the, not possibly, there'll be someone from the school district as well. I'll let the school district decide how those people are selected. But the idea is we'll start to put together some ideas on what we can do there. You know, one of the things to note is that whatever we do, because it is immediately adjacent to a school property, and right now it's on what's currently a pre-K facility, we have to be cognizant of that in our uses, that it doesn't create any issues for those pre-K facilities. But again, the goal is to look at something that we can do that doesn't cost the town a ton of money, that we can operate it in a manner that it is essentially either cost neutral or even potentially at cost positive, depending on, you know, how good the rentals are that particular year. So similar again to the cabins we rent in our town parks, cabins and pavilions. Any questions?
Sir.
Anything online?
Nothing online.
Hearing no further questions, can please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz, I have resolution number 11-143-2020 to call for a public hearing for a local law to revise the chicken coop provisions in the Henrietta Town Code.
Second, any discussion?
If we are having a public hearing and individuals who might have unregistered coops in their backyard come in to speak, I'm just asking that there not be any penalty or anything like that for them to come and speak, because many people might not have been aware that there's a process in place.
Okay. I
Good
believe
idea.
the way it works is if you're not, you basically get a notice to correct. I'm not aware that there's a fine. If you basically correct within the amount of time, then there's no fine. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford.
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have resolution 11-144 to authorize the purchase of an email server, archiving software, and protection software as part of the Information Technology Department's 2020 budget. Second. So as we looked at this, just following up from our discussion at the workshop, Andrew came up with the most cost-effective manner, which was to, the server is still the same, but we're looking to use a mail store server for archiving emails. It's a system we actually used at Pictometry. So we have a familiarity with it. It worked really well. And that just became the most cost-effective method because the maintenance costs on some of the hardware solutions were too much, and the cloud-based solutions, again, the annual costs were too high. So this has a much lower annual cost. And then, I'm sorry, just Lisa, could you check to see if your mic is on? Is it green? Okay. I just got a notice that people are having trouble hearing you, so.
You speak so softly.
Yep.
I thought I was being.
And so anyway, the email security, which basically it's spam and phishing protection as well. Basically, it helps with the cybersecurity. That one does still have a decent maintenance cost, but that's one that is constantly being updated because as new threats come out, they're constantly updating it for those threats. They're constantly looking for viruses, Trojan horses, worms, all sorts of stuff. So that one I have less of an issue paying a decent maintenance cost because again, they are constantly updating it. I have a problem with some of the maintenance costs on an archiving because how often does archiving change, right? So I think this is a great solution. You'll notice it's a not to exceed number. We basically have multiple quotes for the server, but for the other two, we only have 1 or 2 quotes each. So we're still awaiting the remaining quotes. But that not to exceed number is if you basically take the current lowest quotes, add them all up, we rounded it off a little bit. Obviously as the resolution says, we'll go with the lowest quote in each category, but that's the not to exceed number, which you'll notice is down from what we were first discussing previously. So any other questions, comments?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
We heard you that time.
Mr. Supervisor, I have resolution 11-145, 2020 to award the 2020 sanitary sewer and lateral repair project bid contract to Lemize Construction, Inc.
Second.
Any discussion? So I'll note that this is the same company that did last year's. We got a lot of really good responses from the community. They did a very good job in terms of minimizing impact to residents, minimizing disturbances in their yards. And they did a really good job cleaning up and restoring to the previous condition. So we're very happy that they came in again and that they were low bid. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor and fellow board members, I have resolution 11-146, 2020, to authorize the purchase of 1 new Ford F-450 sewer service truck as part of the sewer department 2020 budget.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sounds like a nice truck, 450.
Yeah, well, it's got to be because it has to be big enough to support a crane that can lift the pumps out of the pump station for the sewer department.
Probably a nice diesel truck, huh?
I don't know my Fords, but I would say yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Glad to see it's being purchased by a local company within the county at least.
Mhm.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, I have Resolution 11-147-2020 to authorize the purchase of one new 1.5-ton steel drum roller as part of the Highway Department's 2020 budget.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz, I have Resolution 11-148-2020 to make appropriate budget transfers per the 2020 adopted budget.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Fellow board members, I have Resolution 11-149-2020 to authorize person to be hired.
Second.
Any discussion? I guess that should be people to be hired.
I was-
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the problem is I started to read this one, then looked over here. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye.
Mr. Supervisor, I have Resolution 11-150, 2020 to call for a public hearing for an Article 10 vote on a historic property at 156 Summer Sky Drive for a shed permit application.
Second.
Any discussion? This was a late addition. Basically, the applicant came in, we saw it was on a historic property. The shed is visible from the front street, so by definition, it needs an Article 10 vote. So we added it as a last minute because we didn't want to impose hardship on the property owner to have to wait an additional 2 weeks to call a public hearing and then another 3 weeks after that to have their hearing. So I apologize for the last minute addition, but again, it's just a call for a public hearing. The discussion itself will be next week, and the Historic Site Committee is meeting between now and then in order to get us a letter of recommendation.
These Article 10 votes don't seem to stop.
Nope.
Sure don't. Didn't have them for years and.
Well, we actually pay attention to that stuff, so. Any other discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barley,
Aye.
Councilmember Stafford,
Aye.
Councilmember Safranek,
Aye.
Councilmember Bolzner,
Aye.
Supervisor Schultz.
Aye. Do we have any additional public comments?
Yeah, oh, sorry, Steve, I just was
ahead.
slow to read it. We just received a comment from Joe Winslow saying that there is a motion before the Historic Site Committee to remove 156 Summer Sky Drive from the historic site list to be considered by email and at next meeting on May 19th.
So my understanding, to remove something, would that also be essentially an article or at least a public hearing? Right. So, so either way, whether for this public hearing, whether it's to approve the shed or whether it's to remove the house from the historic site rolls, either way, it's going to require the public hearing. And again, either way, if either of those are approved, then it goes to directly to the Director of Building and Fire Prevention to issue the permit. So again, from a procedural standpoint, either one of those, they will get their permit.
Make sure the notice says it can be 3 to 1.
Okay. So note to Jenny, note that the public hearing for the Article 10 vote will either be to approve or not the shed, or to approve or not the removal of the historic site designation for the property. Any other public comments? I'll open up the reports by thanking all the people who showed up today to help distribute masks. We had 12 stations distributing masks. We just distributed another 70,000 plus a 70,000 on Saturday, so 140,000 masks to between 7,000 and 8,000 cars.
Wow, that's great.
I will say the Wednesday weather was much, much nicer than the Saturday weather.
The Saturday weather was fun, though.
I felt like I was in a snow globe and Mother Nature kept picking it up and shaking it.
You're right.
We wanted to sing Christmas carols.
That's right. My deputy town supervisor threw a snowball at me. It was a blast. Fortunately, he missed.
I heard they missed.
Yeah. That's what happens when you don't have baseball season, right? So, thanks to Harry Bronson, as well as some other individuals from around the town and around the community that helped out. And thanks to the sheriff's department, the DO, and the town DPW staff, whether signage, barriers, directing traffic. It was a lot of people. And we realized there was some inconvenience on Calkins Road, but it moved very quickly. And, we worked to minimize that inconvenience. Again, I think it was pretty successful, and it's hats off to all the people involved to make that work. Also, a special thanks to the hordes of people from the town, employees, especially those who were in their pandemic off week, who came in, and we spread throughout the rec center so we had good social distancing, and packaged those 140,000 masks because they came in sealed back boxes of 50. We had to break them out into 12 and 24 packs. Especially the 12 packs was a lot of work. So again, thanks to everybody involved. It went exceedingly well, and it was very, very much appreciated by the members of the community. There's been questions. A couple people have been calling in asking whether there's going to be a third distribution. Not that I am aware of. The county had acquired 3 million masks. That's about 4 masks per resident. The one thing I will say is if there is a distribution, it will be done through all towns throughout the county at once. That was one of the things the Council of Supervisors decided to do along with the county, because we felt that if a couple towns here or there did a distribution, they would get inundated from people from other towns. So by doing every town at the same time, it helped tremendously in that situation. Doesn't mean we still didn't get some people from other towns when they ran out, or some people allegedly went.
Double dipped?
Well, it could be double dipping too. Allegedly, some people looked at our line and tried a different town.
I heard we were better than Greece and Irondequoit. So.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, believe me, there were a lot of needling and bragging rights at the supervisor's call on Tuesday, and depending on who you believe. But like I said, it went really well. I know that those of us who were there today were a little sore and glad to be sitting down, because we actually started at 9 because people had already been piling up. So we were there, and then we went to 2:15 because we still had some masks left. So we kept it going a bit long. So it was, over 5 hours of distributing masks.
Wow,
But
great job, team.
Yeah,
that's great.
We do have an allotment of some additional masks. Again, we're not going to distribute generally to the public. What we are going to do is we're going to be putting packages. We're going to work with the Chamber of Commerce to get them out to businesses that are opening up, so that if your workers need masks, you'll have some. We're also working with community organizations. So we'll be reaching out to the Legion. We've been reaching out to churches, Elks, Moose, folks like that, to get them some masks as well, so that as those things start to lift in terms of, you know, people being able to, whether it's different levels of retail and other businesses opening, or whether it's some of the community type things relaxing, we want them to be able to have masks in the event that, so people are supposed to show up with them, but in case someone doesn't, they'll have some disposable masks that they can hand out to make sure. Included in that list is also, we're having some set aside for the Cub Care and other summer care programs that are currently in the process of getting approval from the Department of Health. So the town of Henrietta and the Rush Henrietta School District are working together to make those happen. There's a lot of rules involved, like it's 10 or 12 per classroom, depending on the number of instructors you have, and they can't mix classrooms. You know, we talked about, can they use the gym? They can, but only one classroom. So we're gonna have 5 classrooms per building. And then, you know, each day, only one classroom uses a gym, and then we wipe everything down, and then we spray the disinfectant. So the same thing's gonna be happening. There'll be temperatures taken for people entering the facilities. We're gonna do everything we can to help protect against the spread of the virus. But, you know, as people are starting to return to work with no school in session, and, you know, a lot of daycares are not open right now. Some parents are going to need a means to go to work and have their kids be watched. And it's not safe for them to rely on grandparents as much, because again, the grandparents are the most vulnerable population out there. So by, you know, as much as we can, working between us and the school district and some folks who've been working with the school district for years, we're gonna provide as much daycare, affordable daycare. It's not exactly daycare, it's not true daycare, but like I said, it's called Cub Care by the one, or summer care. It's basically a means where your children will be supervised while you're at work. You know, we've been working on that, and keep an eye out as we don't have approval yet, but in talking with the folks at the 2 different approval organizations, they see no impediments. One of the keys to that, however, is that we continue to move forward. We're one of only 3 regions in the entire state that met all the criteria to start to reopen, and we're in phase 1. It's essential that people continue to make the effort, that people continue, you know, when you're to observe social distancing, when you're in less than that range, make sure you have your mask on, make sure you wash your hands, disinfect regularly. Because again, if we start to backslide, then we may not be able to offer that service. And even if, so the people might not be able to go back to work. And obviously there's a lot of people hurting. There's a lot of businesses hurting. We would really love to see this start to reopen, but it is essential that we do so responsibly. And I will note that it's largely voluntary. It requires us all to be good neighbors, to be good community members, and to, you know, respect the social distancing, respect the policies. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. I know there's sometimes political lines being drawn. It's not political. It's scientific data. When you look at the stuff, it does have a higher mortality rate, especially among seniors. It has a very high contagion rate. And so, you know, the long asymptomatic period allows it to spread to a lot of people if you're not careful. So it's very important that people take practice to minimize that chance of spread. And the more we do that, the more we'll be able to continue to open up. And hopefully we'll be back largely in business. I think it's going to be a long time before things are back to normal. And we may even see that the new normal has some changes, like every cold and flu season, people wear masks. or handshaking is not done as much as it once was, or stuff like that. But, you know, hopefully we can get to a much more normal state than we're at now. And I will yield the floor to someone else who wants to talk so I can.
I'd just like to say, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm going to cut you off by mistake.
Nothing new. Nothing new.
Okay. Steve, I want to say thanks to your idea to reaching out to some of the churches and synagogues around the community for the mass. They're very happy about it. They're happy to email and get the mass, and thanks a lot, because their congregation, their members really need that too, because mass are at a premium right now. So people do need them. So I think it's a good idea that you're going to give them out to the Elks Lodge and reach out for cup care and stuff like that. And for the businesses that are open up, it's a great idea. Keep us all safe. Thanks. Sorry, Mike.
I'd also like to thank all the town workers and volunteers who and FoodLink who helped out with the food distribution back 2 weeks ago. That was a big success. That was done in our parking lot here at the rec center also. So that was very good. And also, I don't think a lot of people are aware that there's free coronavirus testing at MCC. You have to meet some criteria for it. But you could call to see if you qualify, and that number is 1-888-364-3065. Once again, 1-888-364-3065.
And that's especially for anybody who is an essential, you know, worker in an essential business or a first responder or in the medical community. You know, that's one of the criteria by which we are measured, is that we are doing adequate testing. So, you know, as far as the rate at which you can get tested, you can get retested every week if you so desire. Not a lot of people like having that giant Q-tip shoved up their nose, but, you know, again, if you are at all concerned as to whether you are positive, we encourage you to go and get tested.
And I believe that in order to continue to open things up, people need to get tested.
That is correct.
Yeah.
We have to maintain that particular rate of particular rates of testing in order to continue to move forward.
And I will say it's not all that pleasant to have it done.
Is it a giant Q-tip?
Giant.
It's a swab.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a
The
small-
tip isn't that big, but the length of it is.
So we had, again, I want to just say what you've said. I want to thank everybody. The residents were all very gracious, and they were the line moved quickly. People were great. They listened to us. It was really awesome. The town did a fabulous job, and it worked out well, I think. Library board also had a meeting last night, and a couple things going on there. A lot of people are holding their literature and stuff until the library opens up, and the library would appreciate if you're done with it, if you would return it, just because that way they can get the shelves restocked, get everything ready, give it the proper time before they can put it back on the shelves. And when they do open up, they have the literature all back there. Adrian wanted me to let people know that they are hoping that soon we will be able to do curbside pickup again. We don't have a date for that, so please don't call the library and ask them what the date is for that, but they are working on a program to get that back open, because I know that's important to the community. And it's a great program, and her team is really passionate about getting that literature out to the community and helping them as much as they can. And when they met last night, they came up with a COVID-19 policy, and I would like to read it to everyone. What they felt worked for the library, and this is their COVID crisis response goal. During and after the COVID-19 pandemic, the Henrietta Public Library will serve the community, fulfill its mission, and meet the goals of its plan of service by meeting the public's needs for reliable information, providing access to critical resources, and serving as a hub of community organization. So I just want to thank them for everything they're doing.
So I'll note that Adrian got us the reopen plan and the stuff for curbside. So I sent that into Bob Duffy and to Vinny Esposito. So hopefully we'll hear back soon as far as when the date can be, when they can offer that curbside service. I'm hoping it's as early as next week. I know government doesn't normally move fast, but I will give kudos to Bob and Vinny. They've been very responsive. So hopefully we'll hear something soon and we can get that set up and, be running as soon as next week or the week after. When we were doing that curbside service on the shutdown side coming into the pandemic, it was very well received. And so I think there's a lot of people who would be very excited to see it open back up again. So again, we'll definitely post that on our website. The library will post it on their website. We'll post it on Facebook. It'll be all over.
Last thing I have, and it also has to do with the library. I want to thank the director, Adrian Pettinelli, and our staff for opening up the library for the blood drive. Is going to be done in my father's name on Saturday, June 6th, between 10 and 3 p.m. You'll soon see information about how to sign up for it on some websites. Our Red Cross contact, Rebecca Cry, wanted to give her a shout out to say thank you too. The goal is to get about 30 units, which would really help to save lives of about 90 people. So look for that and help out where you can. Thanks.
Bob, what did you say the dates were?
June 6th is a Saturday from 10 to 3 p.m. It's at the library.
June's right around the corner.
Yes, it is. Right around the corner now.
Pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything, Millie?
Well, I just wanted to add a reminder that the school district is continuing to distribute food at locations around, so that if there's any families out there that are in need, please reach out. Food Link, the school district, there's resources that are out there. And our senior center is continuing to do a great job in trying to reach out to the seniors and to make sure that our seniors are taken care of. So if you are aware of a senior that's in need, please make sure to let the senior center know so that their needs can be met as well.
And thanks to all the people who, when they were coming through picking up masks, dropped off food.
Yeah.
So we collected a bunch of that. And the senior center, like they've been doing with all the donations, the volunteers will disinfect the exterior packaging and then get it over to Raft for distribution.
That's great.
One of the things I'll note on the Food Link distribution, they always provide extra boxes because whereas you're supposed to come in ahead of time, they're always afraid that somebody registered and it got lost, or there's a few people who didn't understand. So they always provided extras in that regards. And then basically what happened is when we had those extras, they went through that same process for distribution, either to the seniors or out through RAF. So,
That's great.
lot of good stuff going on. Anything else? So lastly, I'd like to thank Terry Danielle for providing the interpreting services. We might have to ice your hands because this meeting, well, the combination of the two meetings has gone a while, but thank you very much for providing the services and as always.
Thank you, Terry Danielle.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any, hearing no objections, meeting adjourned.
Great job, everyone.
Let us know when we're off.